Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Okay. Thank you for coming. So my name is Corrine Paul, and I am a member of the planning committee that helped put this together. So we're so glad that you're here, and it's nice seeing all the names starting to come in on the chat from where everyone is calling from. And this is such an important and timely discussion today. So again, we really appreciate it. So this arms trafficking coalition is a coalition of faith-based and non-faith-based groups focused on ending illegal arms trafficking of weapons and ammunition from the US into Haiti. Many of us who are members of this group have partnerships and programs in Haiti, and many of us are based in the US. So the plea from our Haitian partners is that we need to end the flow of weapons and ammunition going to Haiti in order to stop the gang violence so that Haitians can live in peace in their own country. So thank you to all the members of this coalition. Thank you for all the audience folks here today. And a special thank you to the sponsoring organizations whose names you see listed on the screen here. And so now I'd like to pass it to other members of the planning committee to introduce themselves. Again, my name is Corrine Paul. I cover civil and political rights policy at American Jewish World Service, and we have a number of partners in Haiti that we have the privilege of working with. I will pass the floor to Kim now to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Kim Lamberty, Executive Director of Quixote Center. We also have economic justice programs, economic development programs with partners in Haiti, and we are part of the planning committee for this effort. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll pass it to Teresa.
Hi, everyone. Teresa Blumenstein. I am the coordinator of the Justice Coalition of Religious, which is comprised of 23 NGOs representing Catholic sisters, brothers, and priests through advocacy with the United Nations system. And I will pass to Angie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Howard McParland. I work for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas Justice Team and a member of the Nuns Against Gun Violence Steering Committee. Glad to be here. And I'll pass to Susanna.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's session. I'm Susanna Chubiri, a Meridional sister, and working at the Meridional Office on Global Concerns. We are part of the organizing team for this webinar. Thank you and welcome.
And pass it to Claudette.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Claudette David. I am a board member of the Quixote Center. I'm also a member of the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network. Thank you. And I'll pass it to, I think, is that it? I think that's it.
Yes, I can take it back from here. So those are the members of our planning committee. And now I will introduce our panelists. So we're excited to be joined by really three experts in this work who focus on either the arms trafficking piece, the human rights piece, or working directly with partners in Haiti. So first is William O'Neill. Bill O'Neill is a lawyer specializing in humanitarian, human rights, and refugee law, with a special focus on the establishment and maintenance of rule of law in post-conflict situations. Currently, he serves as the United Nations expert on human rights in Haiti, and previously he has served as senior advisor on human rights in the United Nations mission in Kosovo, the chief of the UN Human Rights Field Operation in Rwanda, and head of the legal department of the UN OAS mission in Haiti. He has helped establish the Haitian National Police and has worked on judicial, police, and prison reform in several countries. Mr. O'Neill is also a professor and has created and delivered courses on human rights, rule of law, and peacekeeping for a number of universities and peacekeeping training centers, and has taught senior military, police, and humanitarian officials from dozens of countries. Karine Jocelyn will be our next speaker. Karine is a nonprofit executive and leader with more than 25 years of experience working in human services as an accomplished administrator, trainer, and program officer. Ms. Jocelyn has over 15 years of experience working in Haiti specifically, and in 2017, she founded the Haitian Women's Collective, and she's currently working to launch a fund for Haitian women. Karine continues to give of her time as the most recent board chair of the Haiti Adolescent Girls Network, which is known for their internationally recognized model for safe spaces for girls. She's also served on the boards of Beyond Borders, the We Prosper Coalition, and the Support Center for Nonprofit Management in New York. And last but not least, we have John Lindsay Poland. He coordinates the Stop U.S. Arms to Mexico project of global exchange, and he co-directs the California Healing Justice Program of the American Friends Service Committee. He has written about, researched, and advocated for human rights and demilitarization of U.S. policy for more than 40 years. His research has focused on the gun trade, police militarization, U.S. foreign military assistance and military bases, and respect for human rights. John has produced several reports and a documentary on the devastating weapons trade from the United States to Mexico, most recently titled The Iron River of Weapons to Mexico and No Shelter from the Storm, an update on the Iron River of guns. He also supports local activists in California to challenge police narrative, budgets, and military gear. So thank you again to all of our panelists for being here today. So I'll start by giving the floor to Bill. Bill, can you tell us more about the human rights situation in Haiti and how gun trafficking is contributing to this situation? How are weapons and ammo entering the country? And what has been the role of Haiti's transitional government, the Haitian National Police, and the Multinational Security Support Mission, or MSS, in responding to this current situation?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you all today. Yes, and to answer your questions, Corinne, I think first I'll start with the human rights situation is catastrophic. I'm not going to go into great detail. There's not enough time, and I'm sure many of you know the general picture of what is happening. But the role of weapons and the weapons flow into Haiti has been an extremely important and exacerbating factor in the commission of human rights violations, because the gangs are getting, and we'll go into this much more throughout the rest of the session, but the gangs are getting their weapons and bullets primarily from the United States. And with this, and heavy weapons too, I mean, these are quite serious weapons of war in many cases. Sniper rifles, armor-piercing munitions are now going into Haiti, into some of the gangs. And they use these weapons to terrorize, control populations. The number of killings, which is mostly by arms in Haiti by the gangs, is way up, as my UN colleagues in Port-au-Prince have been monitoring over the last few years. There's been a big spike in the last 6 to 8 months. And they also use the guns and bullets to intimidate as part of the sexual violence. And we'll hear more about that later today, also from another speaker. But the incidents of rape and sexual violence are literally off the charts. My UN colleagues have actually stopped counting the cases because they know whatever number they came up with would be misleadingly low. And all of this is made possible by the arms that they use and deploy. Kidnappings way up, and just taking over more and more territory. So that's the role that the guns and ammunition play in enabling the gangs to conduct this reign of terror over huge parts of the capital, just about all the capital now, and spreading into the Central Plateau area up into Mirabelais. You know about the attacks up there in the last few weeks, and threatening Hanche and in the Artibonite Valley, and we're getting disturbing accounts of gang activity increasing in the south and in the Great North, which up till now had seen very little of this. The Haitian National Police, your other question, very much overwhelmed, not nearly enough of them. On a good day, it's 9,000 or so for a population of 11 million. To give you a contrasting example, the Dominican Republic, with about the same population, has 25,000 police. And I know there are issues with policing and over-policing, but there is a serious challenge here with under-policing, and that there are huge parts of Haiti that are just not protected by the state in any way. And the gangs have filled that void. And they certainly don't respect human rights, I'll tell you right now, as I just was saying. So the Haitian National Police, overwhelmed. outgunned, and also divided. There are divisions within the police, I'm sorry to say, turf battles, personality conflicts, and they are not, the gangs are actually much more unified right now than the Haitian state is. Because there's also a problem. The second part of your question was the Haitian government, such as it is. The Transitional Presidential Council has very little legitimacy left. These are the 9 people that are kind of they're occupying the executive authority. 7 of them have voting power. 3 of them have been accused of serious corruption charges, and they refused to resign, which has really tarnished the image of the council, which doesn't help in any way. It doesn't help with funding, with getting international support and donors engaged in helping, because you can understand why they question, should they pump money into a government that has a serious corruption problem. And there's a division between parts of that government and the Haitian National Police. So not a lot of good news there either. And the third element you asked about is the multinational force currently led by Kenya. It's at only 40% of its capacity. I don't blame them. They do what they can, but they do not have enough of anything that they need to make a difference. The short answer, I often get asked, have they made a difference? My short answer is not really. It could be much worse. You could always think that way, and it probably would be much worse without the MSS, but they have not been able to retake any territory. In fact, the gangs are gaining more territory. And again, it's not their fault. They do what they can, but they don't have what they need, especially they don't have helicopters. They don't have surveillance drones. They don't have the proper vehicles to operate either in urban areas in Port-au-Prince or now up in the mountains in Kenskoff and the hills above the capital. They're constantly, their vehicles are breaking down. There are no spare parts. I won't go into all the details that are very boring, but actually have a life and death impact, because when the vehicles are out of commission, the Kenyans really aren't able to move and to operate. So the MSS is really coming up short, and I don't see, frankly, a lot of increase in support in terms of financing of the force. It depends on voluntary contributions. It's not a UN peacekeeping operation, so it doesn't have a budget, so it has to raise money like a beggar with a cup going around. And frankly, Haiti is not a priority for many in the international community, with crises in Ukraine, Gaza, Syria, Sudan, you name it. Haiti, it's really hard to get attention sometimes paid to Haiti, and it's even harder to get funding and equipment and support that the MSS needs to succeed. So again, I really don't have much good news of anything, frankly, when it comes to Haiti these days. I'm sorry to say the situation is very grim, dire. I was there in early March, and I never saw it it was worse than I've ever seen it in the years I've been working in and on Haiti. And it's only gotten worse since early March, and it's really, time is running out. That's my message since I've come back. Just briefly on a couple of your other questions. As I said, the arms and munitions overwhelmingly come from the United States, either directly from Florida primarily to Haiti, or through the Dominican Republic. That we're seeing more and more of that. My reports I'm getting from people on the ground, that there's a lot of the weapons and ammunition coming in from the DR. There's a small amount coming up from Colombia. Even the president of Colombia has admitted this, that some of the weapons and stockpiles that were turned in as part of the ending of the war with, mostly ending of the war with FARC and other armed groups in Colombia, some of those have disappeared. And he said, I'm afraid some of those weapons have gotten to Haiti. And that's not a good thing, obviously, at all. The Haitian, as I said, the Haitian state is so weak. I interviewed the head of the border police when I was there in March. She told me she has 350 people for the whole border. She only deals with the land border with the DR. There are 4 border official crossings. There are many, many unofficial border crossings. Contraband is flowing in and out. She has 1 drone and 5 vehicles. So again, the incapacity of the Haitian state to secure its own border is quite dramatic, and that's just as bad with the maritime ports and then the airports. Well, the international airport is closed in Port-au-Prince, but there's not a single scanner, she told me, not a single metal scanner in all of Haiti to try to detect weapons as they come in. So that's obviously a huge problem. And finally, I'll just end. It is interesting, though, with the Dominican border, if it were to be closed seriously, and we know the Dominicans are taking all kinds of actions against Haitians now in the Dominican Republic, which are cruel and violating human rights. But if there's any good, if there's a single good aspect that might come of the Dominicans really clamping down on their border, it could diminish somewhat the flow. It might stop or lower. And I'll give you a quick example of that, because about 15 months ago or so, when the Dominicans did shut down the border because they were upset about this canal that Haitians were digging along the river, that's the northern part of the border with the country. They were upset that water was going to be siphoned off, and it was a pure political thing. But anyway, they did really close the border. And I worked with one of the nuns I work with in Cité Soleil, told me about a week after the border closed that she said she was talking to gang members, and they told her that that gang had started to ration its bullets. And the reason they were starting to ration their bullets is because their supply had dried up and they weren't getting any more from the Dominican Republic. So, we'll see. But it just goes to show you, if we were to really clamp down, the United States in particular, the Dominican Republic, and if we could beef up the inspections on the Haitian side, I think it could have a serious dent and get the arms embargo that's authorized by the UN Security Council. And every country legally in the world is obliged to take actions to prohibit the export or trafficking of arms and munitions into Haiti. If countries really would take that up and take it up seriously, along with more sanctions and along with beefing up the MSS, the international force, I think the situation in Haiti could turn around. That's probably one of the most frustrating things about all this. Compared to many of the other catastrophes in the world today, I think Haiti is doable, in the sense that the gangs have no popularity. The population hates them. They're not that big. They're not that many. And if we were just to get concerted efforts in all of these areas, stopping guns, sanctioning, and getting the force and the Haitian National Police the support they need, it could turn around. But we're not there yet, and we don't have much time. But thank you very much, and I look forward to the other speakers and to your questions.
Thank you for that really kind of stunning and sobering statistics, but I do appreciate that you really laid out very specific things that could be done, including the real impact that stopping the flow of arms could have. And it is a silver lining, at least, that you say that you feel that this solution could be doable if we can get more attention to it. So Karine, I'd like to come to you next. Now that Bill has provided a broad level overview of the situation and some of the international dynamics, can you tell us what the situation looks like specifically for women and girls within Haiti? How are they being uniquely impacted by the situation there?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karina. I appreciate it. And I'm glad that we're starting off on a point with a little bit of hope. What Bill said really struck me about our being able to change this. It's not all a kind of doomsday approach. So I am the founder and director of the Haitian Women's Collective. It's a collective of Haitian women-led grassroots organizations throughout Haiti that work in different sectors. And I'm grateful to not necessarily speak on their behalf, because they're allowing me to speak. So I am grateful for that. So today I'm here to share some remarks around violence as it relates to women and girls. And I always try to add in girls, because as many of us know, Haiti has a very large youth population. In fact, over 50% of the population in Haiti is youth-based. So looking at girls also, unfortunately, we see girls as young as 10 years old. We've heard reports of even younger than that, who are subject to sexual violence. A UN report in 2023 mentioned by several local sources in different parts of the capital, in particular in Port-au-Prince, that there was a, quote, worrying increase in cases of rape and other gender-based violence in gang-controlled neighborhoods and displacement sites. And just now we heard that they have stopped counting. I had to write that down in my red ink here. That now we have stopped counting the cases because there are so many. Women's rights advocates have documented these abuses and demanded urgent actions, including a formal hearing, which I participated in with many colleagues, to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, really demanding action. And yet that action, we believe, is still missing. Concrete data is available through reports, the UN, the World Bank, the State Department, local organizations. But due to the increasing lack of ineffective governance, fragility of systems, a dysfunctional justice system, and an influx of guns into Haiti, the use of gender-based violence has grown dramatically in scale and ruthlessness, with gangs now continuing to deploy sexual abuse as a routine means of torture and control for Haitian women. Reports and data and informal stories that we hear from our partners in various communities speak to the impact of massacres that have occurred, general day-to-day violence due to armed gang members, and the need for prevention, solidarity, and justice at this time. So what is the current status? What are the ripple effects of violence against women and girls? Bill did a great job in sharing kind of the context and lens of it all. In some areas, service providers reported receiving an average of 40 victims of rape per day. So I'm not a big person on data, but I think that right there, and this is from, I believe, 2024, either early 24, end of 23. 40 rape victims in a day reported. And remember, this is reported. Many women, just like throughout the world, in Haiti are not coming forward to report for many reasons. Women who are gang raped, assaulted, harassed, or physically mutilated, this has become the norm, almost a standard of living, whereby many do not report it. There is an increase of sexually transmitted infections, unplanned and unwanted pregnancies, with increasing transmission of HIV also a possible outcome. Survivors are not accessing much needed medical or mental health care. A lot of that is because it's maybe not available with the closing of health centers and hospitals and so forth. Many cases, as I mentioned, still go unreported. Women are displaced. They don't have local resources. And the fabric of their community neighbors and informal support system, including the importance of churches, the school system, have all been devastated by violence. Most Haitian women are on their own, trying to figure it out, with no one seemingly caring about them. Our HWC partners, along with other organizations locally, are dealing themselves ravaged by insecurity and humanitarian collapse, are often the sole providers of services and care. Recently, the impact of USAID, certainly stoppage of many services, certainly that has an increased impact for them. You know, when we talk about violence against women, we often, in gender-based violence, we often think about sexual violence or assault of women. But I also like to include the context around what is structural violence against women. It's important, I think, for us to look at those different aspects as well, which are directly and indirectly related. So when we talk about structural violence against women, women are caught in a political warfare that they did not create. Haitian women don't have money to buy guns. Haitian women are victims of economic policies that impact agriculture, which directly impacts them and their ability to feed their children, pay their school fees, and to be independent. Women know judicial systems no longer are working and or care about them. The word justice, in fact, is almost laughable for most of them, seeing it as taboo or just shrugging it all off. Structural violence related to health systems that are already fragile show that for 1 in 61 Haitian women are dying due to a related maternal care. Could be prenatal, postnatal, during birth itself. 1 in 61 in Haiti, 1 in 410 in the Dominican Republic, if we're talking about comparison, 1 in 600 in Jamaica, and 1 in 1,800 in Cuba. So you can see how even getting pregnant is a danger for women in Haiti. There's also the piece, I think, of emotional violence and our asking ourselves, do we really care about Haitian women? Do we care about the safety of girls? Migration impacts communities where families are now separated. Neighbors in Haiti are often seen as family members. Many of them have left the country, and there is an understanding that no one will return, or frankly wants to return, or can return. Imagine the impact on children at this time, because many women are mothers or grandmothers or aunties, informal and formal, and the long-lasting trauma of all of this. I do want us to, when we talk about women and the impact of women, women are obviously an important fabric of the community, and women's rights are human rights. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And I think everything you said was such a clear indication of why it's so important that we're being able to hear directly from the stories of folks who are within Haiti. We talked about the data and how important that is. And I'm glad that you're also reminding us that each piece of that data, when we're talking about the violence, is someone's real life. And I think you brought forward an important question of, what happens when the providers and the caregivers are also impacted by that violence, and how things break down when that violence becomes normalized. So thank you for bringing it forward. And I think in adding your voice to this conversation, it's reminding us to not normalize it.
Exactly. Thank you.
So now that we've gotten that deep dive into what things are looking like in Haiti specifically, I'd like to go to John to make some of the connections of what we're seeing in other arms trafficking movements. So specifically, if you could draw connections for us on what the campaign to end trafficking looks like for Mexico, how are these issues linked and what can we learn from that work? And then as you answer, I would also be curious if there is legislation or policy that can get at some of these challenges.
Well, thank you so much, Karine. I really want to take a breath after Karine Jocelyn's and Bill's stunning presentations about what is going on in Haiti. I'm going to take a step back because I think when we look at the flow of guns to Haiti, we need to understand this as a massive market, and that a lot of the issues have to do with the lack of regulation of that market. So I'm going to show you some slides in order to better understand this a little bit visually. This might be a bit overwhelming. This is a representation of the number of federally licensed firearms dealers in the United States, with the size of the gun icon being the number of licensees per zip code. So you can see there's more than 75,000 licensed gun dealers in the United States everywhere. The gun laws are governed by state, but it is an enormous, permissive, and militarized market. And that is why we see this as a structural problem, that for the same reasons that people are concerned about gun violence in the United States, those same structural issues apply to gun trafficking across US borders into Mexico, Haiti, and other countries. So I'm going to talk a bit about, particularly around gun violence, gun trafficking to Mexico, which is the most documented and the largest flow of illicit firearms from the United States to other countries. And first, we need to understand that the cross-border movement of firearms, unless it's an export, if it's carried over the border by land, is illegal. But particularly with Mexico, and we'll see also with Haiti, it's very easy. It is very simple to bring guns out of the country. It's much more difficult to bring things into the country because of the way the migration system is set up. It's also extremely difficult because of the massive commercial illicit commerce going over the border, which is also why the drug war has not been successful at the border, because actually stopping illegal contraband that is coming over the border or going over the border south is extremely difficult to do. Now, a lot of the data that we have is about guns that were recovered in another country and then submitted for tracing to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. But it's a very small number of guns that are actually trafficked, out of those that are trafficked, that are traced to a purchase, and even fewer that are investigated, and even fewer are recovered on the US side of the border before being trafficked over the border. So that's what the left bar here represents data that we have from Mexico about the number of guns recovered every year. The number of guns actually trafficked into Mexico every year is estimated to be about 250,000. So only about 1/10 of those are recovered. And of those recovered, some portion is traced. Some of them did not originate in the United States. Most of them did, but even fewer of them are traced to an actual purchase point. So I want you to keep that in mind when I show you some maps of where guns were purchased that were trafficked into Mexico. So in the case of Mexico, because of the 2,000-mile land border between the United States and Mexico, and also because of extremely loose firearms laws and a very militarized firearms culture in Texas and Arizona particularly, we see a high concentration of firearms that are purchased in Texas, communities in Texas and Arizona. So this is a map of the number of firearms traced to a portion of Texas by the zip code of purchase. And we can see, for example, in Harlingen, Texas, which is not a very big town, that during this 10-year period, nearly 250 weapons were traced to a particular point of purchase. If we look at, we also obtain data on firearms traces that for guns recovered in the Caribbean. This was 6 Caribbean countries, including Haiti, but also including Barbados, Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Trinidad. And of course, you'll see, as Bill noted, that most of these are coming from Florida. 57% came from Florida. Another about 12% came from the Atlanta area. And we can see that a lot of the ones coming from Florida are coming from Miami and the Miami area, as well as the Orlando area. Very large numbers, that at least of those that are traced. And you'll see here, because in this breakout box here, you can see which countries they were going to. So in this particular zip code, 194 from one zip code, most of them went to the Bahamas. Now, some of those were probably eventually trafficked from the Bahamas to Haiti. So we have a lot of trafficking, as Bill noted, that is not direct from the United States to Haiti, but passes through another country. And so that makes the entire investigative and prevention process that much more complex, because we have ongoing international, inter-island investigations and tracking to do. In the case of that particular zip code, we do know that, like, in that zip code, there's 7 gun dealers. 5 of them are pawn shops, which are probably not the source of most of these firearms. One of them is a firearms dealer that specializes in militarized weaponry. This is from their Facebook page, where they're basically advertising something that is akin to a machine gun that they are selling. So there's a lot of these in Florida, as well as in Texas and Arizona, because of the firearms laws that permit the sale to individual civilians of firearms that are highly desired by criminal organizations in Mexico, in Haiti, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, because with these militarized firearms, more of the violence, more of the illicit businesses, more of the sexual violence, more of the extortion can be carried out. If you've got things that will contest other groups, which at the moment is not so much the case in Haiti because of the union of the gangs, but in Mexico particularly, gangs are contesting territory with each other, and so as well as with the state. And so they are looking for militarized firearms that are easily available on the civilian market in Florida and Texas and Arizona and in other US states. Just want to say something about, many of you have heard about Mexico's litigation against the gun industry. There are 2 different lawsuits. One of them is against 8 different manufacturers that has advanced to the Supreme Court, which is actually not a good thing. This was on the petition of the gun manufacturers themselves. This case was heard 2 months ago, and the Supreme Court is likely to rule in June. I think it's likely that they'll probably throw out the suit because of some federal firearms laws that protect the industry. On the other hand, there is a lawsuit by Mexico, the government of Mexico, against 5 gun dealers in Arizona that have had hundreds of weapons trafficked just from those dealers to Mexico. And that lawsuit has advanced, and probably that type of lawsuit has more potential for other nations like Haiti to use, where gun dealers have been identified through tracing information as problem sources. And there's also a closer link to the trafficking itself. Finally, what we can do, really think that it's important for us to work on narrative. It's important for us to write letters to the editor, to use social media, to highlight these issues, the ways in which this is impacting not only Haitians, but people at home. And there is legislation, the Stop Arming Cartels Act, which would prohibit 50 caliber rifles. It's a weapon that has a range of more than a mile. There's no potential possible use for civilians anywhere. And then finally, the Armas Act, which has to be reintroduced in order to be supported, but it would require a strategy for illicit gun trafficking and create oversight and transparency on exports, legal exports in the Americas. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to conversation.
Thank you, John. That is so helpful to visually see the direct linkages between, the policies and decisions made in the United States, including, like you said, kind of some of the lax gun laws or gun culture, and how that directly links to what that looks like in other countries, whether it be Mexico or Haiti and other parts of the Caribbean. And there's something that you said that I just want to call out to make sure we all remember. You had said, the more guns that there are, the more violence that can be carried out. And I think that's such a succinct way of putting it, that us fixing this arms trafficking issue can be a way to solve so many of the other challenges that we're seeing in Haiti. And so we're going to come to some of the audience questions in just a moment, but first I'd like to hand it to Claudette to talk specifically about some of the legislation related to Haiti.
Thank you. I wanted to quickly go into, so there is a bill, HR 2643, the Haiti Criminal Collusion Transparency Act of 2025, that I am putting in the chat. You can also, for purposes of the recording, can also go to www.congress.gov and then type in HR 2643. And this is a bill that was passed in the House, I want to say in 2023, but it has to be passed in the House and in the Senate before it could go to the president. And what happened is the language was different once the language that was passed in the House was different than the language that the Senate had. And so there was a lot of negotiations happening with the language, but Congressman Meeks reintroduced it on April 9th, 2025. And it already has, he reintroduced it with Congressman McCall and Congresswoman Sheriff Elise McCormick. It already has, it's got bipartisan support with Congressman Lawler, the Republican from New York, and Congressman Brown Fitzpatrick, Congressman from Pennsylvania, has also signed on. And what it does, basically, just the basics of this bill, is it basically makes the Secretary of State submit an annual report that's a public annual report to Congress that ties the criminal gangs and political and economic elites to in Haiti, and imposes sanctions on political and economic elites involved in criminal activity. And this is every year does this, and for 5 years. And the minute it becomes law, then 180 days after 180 days after it becomes law, then this public report has to be made public. And before it was, I think, 90 days, and now it's 180 days, because State Department felt like they needed more time to present this report. And the main things identified is in this report is it identifies a list of the prominent gangs in Haiti and their leaders, and describes their criminal activities. It identifies the Haitian political and economic elites who have direct links to criminal gangs and other organizations. It describes the relationship between the gangs, between the relationships between the gangs and the economic elites. It lists each criminal organization that is trafficking Haitians and other individuals to the US border. It includes an assessment also of how the nature and extent of the collusion between the political and economic elites in Haiti threatens the Haitian people. And it includes an assessment of potential actions that the US government could take to address the findings. So these are, those are the major points of this bill, and it exempts anything related to humanitarian assistance, because it does include the sanctions, and it exempts humanitarian assistance, because I know that's going to come up. And then I've heard in the past several people mention briberies, and they say, well, why, if everyone in Haiti knows who's colluding with the gangs, then why do we need it on paper? And you need it on paper because it's a government document, and you can use this to actually, file an official complaint against those folks. And we're not talking about bribery here, because we do understand that, the situation is such that, just to cross borders, just to go from town to town, people, will have to make some payments to keep your business open. You might need to make some payments, but there are people who are making sure that these gangs survive. That's a different case that we're talking about. So, so that's the bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudette. And I'll just add too, so in addition to the report that you mentioned, a really big piece of why we're supporting this bill is because not only, as you said, will this report really bring to light a lot of the criminal activity and a lot of the folks that are fueling the gangs, but it would also require the US to put sanctions on those folks. And those sanctions are a huge deal, because it would help stop them from fueling the gangs and stop them from continuing their criminal activity. And it would hopefully be a deterrent against others who would seek to do the same. And I saw that one of the questions in the chat was asking about sanctions in particular. And so I think this bill does it in a way that would be useful because it focuses on individual sanctions. Oftentimes when we hear of, populations being indirectly harmed by sanctions is when things are happening, when sanctions are happening to an entire sector. But if this is just one individual being sanctioned, then we don't anticipate negative impacts on others in the population. And I think I'm going to hand it to Angie here to bring forward if there were other questions in the chat for the panelists.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karine, and thank you to all of our incredible panelists. What a wealth of knowledge that we have to draw on here. So I'll invite you because, John, I noticed, for example, that you answered a couple of questions in the Q&A already. Do you want to lift up either of those for the good of the whole? And then I'll invite some others and lift up a couple of the key ones. But since you already named those, let's start there.
Sure. One question is about why, if guns have already entered Haiti, why would we try to stop more from going in? Don't they already have guns, basically? And that is an issue, right? Because guns are durable goods, but they malfunction, and groups generally want to have new weapons. It's part of the way they reward individuals. It's part of their expansion strategies. And of course, there's the question of munitions, which the guns won't function without munitions at all. So the control of both is very important in order to reduce the violence in general, would be my response.
Great. And then, Karine, there was a question specifically about women in the Q&A. I don't know if you saw that. I'll just read it quickly. Talking about the DR currently targeting pregnant women, detaining them at hospitals, and then deporting them to Haiti. And so is there anything that can be done to push the DR to protect the rights of women and babies and to stem that flow of weapons? We'll open that part up to everyone as well.
I mean, I would start and say that, I mean, we all know there are human rights requirements, right? And treaties and things that have been signed, and a standard of human rights that should happen and has not happened historically in the Dominican Republic, right? You have people who were born in the country, and because they're Black, of Haitian nationality or background, I would say, a parentage, that they're not considered Dominican nationals, even though they were born in the country. So it's almost like this whole birthright conversation that unfortunately we are also having here in the United States, the issue of race and racism and lack of equity. And when we look at this issue, and just yesterday I spoke to organization from the DR about this exact issue and what can we do? How can we be supportive? And her answer really was to continue to amplify this, to continue to talk about it, because people are not, the average person is not hearing what's going on. There was at some point this idea of, launching kind of a ban on people traveling for vacation to the DR to feel the impact, right? It's kind of like here in the US where folks have stopped or limited going to Target, and that has had an impact, right? Sadly, morality sometimes is put aside, and it really is about money, and that's what makes a difference. And so maybe that's what it is. I would say that it's sharing information about this, allowing folks to learn and listen and understand what is happening. Women are literally giving birth, either a natural birth or a cesarean section, and being put in cars and transported to the border or wherever they are being sent. There is nowhere that is okay. Just imagine something like that happening here in the States, where we're really trying to ensure better maternal health outcomes, even postpartum. So I think it's sharing the information, but it's also about who sanctions the DR. Where are things written? And maybe there have been, through all this time, but what is it that can be impactful to hold them accountable?
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, I want to turn to you. There's some questions here too about the UN humanitarian aid and peacekeeping forces going to Haiti and US money. Can you give a status update on any of that?
Yes, thank you. It's the U.S. policy it's hard to know what it is. Even State Department people, the embassy in Port-au-Prince, when I talk to them, they're not sure what the policy is on the peacekeeping question. Some of you might not know, but there was an effort to try to transform the MSS, this Kenyan-led force, into a peacekeeping operation, which would have the benefit of having a budget from the UN, much easier and faster procurement. Everything would be better if they could do it. But Russia and China always opposed it for reasons pretty much unrelated to Haiti, much more geopolitical, to make life difficult for the United States. But now we don't know what the United States position would be on it, and it wasn't addressed. There was a Security Council meeting on Monday, and it was not really addressed directly. So we just don't know. The U.S. has been the main contributor to the Kenyan-led force by a long shot. And that was money that was allocated under Biden that was put in a lockbox so that all these cuts and stopping of AID and other things didn't affect that money. But that money will run out, I'm told, in about August. And if there's not new money coming from somewhere, the MSS mission will fold up and go home. And then there will just be the 9,000 Haitian police left to fight this battle.
This is a general question too that I'll open it up to everyone, and even Claudette, if you're interested in jumping in on talking about the legislation. So they ask that given the reality of the gutting of some of those human rights functions that several of you mentioned at the State Department, and specifically the watering down of the State Department reporting on human rights, how do you envision protecting any of the effectiveness of the Collusion Act? I think we could ask that across the legislative pieces as well.
I can actually jump in on this one if it's okay. So in general, yes, I work as an advocate in my role and having meetings with folks in Congress and State Department pretty often. So in general, yes, this is a harder landscape because the priorities of the State Department are changing, or as Bill said, they're more unclear than they've been in the past. However, for the Haiti Criminal Collusion Transparency Act in particular, I think this is something that actually has a really good chance of moving forward. The reason I think that is because, as Claudette mentioned previously, it did pass in the House last Congress with bipartisan support, and it still has bipartisan support now, including support from members who are based in Florida, which is part of where we're saying a lot of these arms are coming from. So it was actually, introduced already, and it's actually already passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So it's currently making progress even in this environment. Additionally, I think something like this has the potential of moving forward because it's actually not asking the U.S. or State Department to care about human rights. It's actually almost like a law and order bill of saying, we see that these problems are happening, and we see that there hasn't been enough consequences for them happening. If someone is a politician or a big business leader and they're fueling the gangs, it's in the U.S. interest to do what it can to stop that, because we know that there'll be a direct national security impact on us here in the U.S. if a country so close to our borders continues to devolve into more violence.
Thank you. And then we're short on time, so I'm going to just pick one more, and I'm going to direct it to you, John. They asked specifically what the state of Florida is doing to stem that flow of guns and ammo, but I'm going to ask you broadly about, we know that most of our gun laws are state-based, and we've talked some about federal legislation, but can you give any kind of insider update on what, if anything, I should say, any of these states with those high markets of exports are doing?
Oh, well, they're mostly moving in the other direction. As is the federal government, right? So kind of going back to the previous question, I do think that particularly the way the United States is right now, I see legislative proposals, whether they are state or federal, as primarily vehicles for shifting the conversation, a little bit like what Karine Jocelyn was saying before. Like people are not really valuing or aware of the human impacts of these markets, and we have to shift the narrative in the conversation in order to move the politics both at the state level and the federal level. It is possible that in the courts that some things can happen, as the litigation from Mexico I think shows. But and I also think that there's probably some economic pressures then that can be brought to bear on some of the private institutions, whether those are chain stores that sell weapons or other local dealers. But I do think that we also need to keep the Democrats aware and on point, and not only on the defensive, but to really create more of a vision of why stopping the flow of these weapons is so important.
Yeah, thank you for that. So many more questions that we didn't have time for, and so much more that we could discuss. But thank you all so much for lending us your time and your expertise. For next steps, before I hand it back over to Karine to close us, you've seen several of this shared in the chat already, and we'll get you these resources. We'll get John's slides. We'll try to get you as much of the info as we can. But one more time is the link to our petition to the Department of Homeland Security. This is an individual sign-on. So if you're an organization, you can have everyone in your organization sign it, not just once. So please do share that and continue to push that link out for sharing. We're at, I think, about 2,300, 2,500 signatures at the moment, but we think we can do much better. So please keep sharing. Back to you, Karine.
Thank you. Kim, is there anything that you wanted to say about the things that you're putting in the chat before I close?
So thanks, Karine. I just put in the chat that we are planning to do some advocacy organizing around all of the legislation that was mentioned today. So we will be in touch with you about that, and we will also share all of the resources that people have been asking for in the chat, including the recording of this and slides if possible. And I also, as Angie said, will call your attention to the petition in the chat that we are encouraging people to sign. We are planning on turning that over to Department of Homeland Security, asking for them for some specific enforcement measures around gun and ammunition trafficking to Haiti. So that's our priority now, is the petition, and then from there we'll move to legislation. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kim. And just thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions and who attended today. We really appreciate your attention to this issue. And as Kim said, we will be in touch with more ways to be involved and to push our US government to do better on these armed trafficking issues. Thanks, everyone.